Bear Wozniak's a very interesting guy. He's written a book about his life, also what he has learned from facing into these giant waves which threaten to throw him not just, well, if he was lucky back on the beach, but sometimes virtually under the beach, deep in the wave, a surfing guide to the soul. Good evening, Bear.
Aloha, Ian. You just increased my cool factor so much out here in Hawaii.
No, good.
Yeah, how's that? Being on your show, my coolness factor just...
It's a great show, and it comes in a little earlier, obviously, in Hawaii.
Well,
so
yeah.
you don't.
Now I got to ask you, I picture you smoking a pipe.
Not inside.
Not
outside.
anymore,
I will both begin and end by evening frequently.
Well, I was thinking if you were doing that, my wife would let me smoke a cigar.
Well, I first of all, congratulations on the book. Comes out Tuesday, but people can find out more by linking up to Bear Wozniak and going take a look at that video. Really cool. Looks like HD video that was shot. That's up on our website.
Yeah. Yeah, my son's a videographer, Shane Woznick, and he and my daughter Fawn worked on that. And, really, really fortunate to have them do it. It really shows, I think, the difference in Hawaii surfers are not just surfers, they're like all-around watermen. So spearfishing, stand-up paddle boarding, scuba diving, sailing. So Hawaiians tend to be more of an all-around waterman because we live right in the middle of an ocean, so we really can't avoid it.
No.
As opposed to, in some places, people say, I'm a short boarder, I'm a boogie boarder, I'm a long boarder, but in Hawaii, we just try to do it all. And, of course, my favorite thing is tandem surfing.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that in just a second, but I thought it was interesting, too, that as a Hawaiian now, you learn to do the traditional Hawaiian evening communal breathing thing with the waves. Can you talk about that?
Well, I'm not so good at it as I used to be, but there's a tradition in Hawaii as the sun, because normally, like right now, I'm looking out my window, the sun has just set, I'm looking at the waves breaking on the beach here in Waikiki. As that sun hits the ocean, you take that, you fill your lungs and your body with oxygen, and then the idea is to slowly breathe out that air until, you try to hold your breath until the sun has set. And, of course, the word aloha, ha means air, or it means breath. So ha is a big thing in Hawaii. The moment you paddle off the beach, even in calm waters, you're in a hostile environment if you end up in a situation where you need to hold your breath. So, that's our tradition, and a lot of people can still practice it. I can't do that anymore. It's about a 5-minute breath hold, but I do have friends that can.
A 5-minute breath hold?
Yeah, that's a long time to hold your breath while the sun is setting.
Yeah, it is.
I had a friend just last year, Archie Kalepa. He had about a 5-minute hold down, and he came up back first, and he's a head lifeguard over in Maui, and he lived. But so we train hard. Like my son Jeremiah, in the first chapter, I talk about him riding waves that some would say were 60 to 70 feet, certainly higher than any coconut tree here in Hawaii, they say.
Yeah.
We used to go out here and paddle out, about a half a mile, and then dive down and grab a rock, and then run underwater with the rock, because that makes you do cardio while you're holding your breath, and you're doing it in the environment you need to be in. So, breath is everything. Aloha is a big thing.
But it's also interesting to hear you talk about that kind of stuff as like a rite of passage.
Absolutely,
into manhood. That Absolutely. It's not just, that you become part of nature, but at the same time you're also becoming more of a human while doing it.
I remember being out here with my son Jeremiah when he was probably about 12, and we paddled out here. I call it the back nine. There's all these great different reefs here, and we paddled out to go surf them like an 18-hole golf course. And by the time we got to the ninth one, Ala Moana Bowls, it was getting big, and it was really a question whether or not he would go to the shoulder or he would paddle out. And he paddled out into the peak and dropped in on one of those gnarly waves. And for me, that was his rite of passage. As a younger boy, I told him, he used to play in the sand and ride his boogie board, pretend like it was a surfboard in the shore break. And I said, one of these days you're going to be sitting out in the lineup next to me. And I remember that day when I sat there and he paddled out and he looked up at me and had this big grin, and he was about 8 years old then. And so I saw him progress into being an incredible waterman. My son Shane also, he loves to, every year when the first big swells come, his favorite thing to do is just to go out and just give himself to the wave and let the wave just pound him.
Yeah.
You know, as a way of, you know, because there's a way that wave imparts its mana, its power to you.
Well, you had that happen a few times where you got pounded by waves. That was a really interesting chapter when you thought you were going to lose it completely. Again, we're talking with Bear Woznick, who's a champion tandem. Are you the reigning champion?
Well, no, Masters World champion. I've won it a couple of years. It's actually, you know, I actually helped develop the World Tour. Yeah, tandem surfing. I actually helped develop the World Tour, but now it's kind of like, you know, I love this expression of tandem so much, but it almost seems kind of silly to compete at it. It's just such a power and beautiful sport. And,
it was, for people that can't imagine it, you can either go take a look at the video we put up at coasttocoastem.com, or you could also just imagine if you were watching figure skaters who were semi-clad figure skaters on surfboards. That's a lot of, you know, that we see that move of the man holding up the female figure skater with one hand over his head and doing something cool with it at the same time. You do that except you're on a surfboard. So imagine doing that, but the ice is moving.
It's all about the girl. I mean, the women have become so extreme. My wife was a national champion gymnast in Sweden. And the women, you know, to compete at the world-class level now, I mean, the women have to be so extreme. The men, we just kind of surf and lift them, but the women do these amazing and extreme and dangerous. The hardest lift we do is I hold the hand, you know, the girl stands in my hands, and I press her up while she's standing up, and her center of gravity is so high above the board. And very dangerous lift, but you know, you have to give kudos mostly to the women.
You know, I think it's a cool video, so I hope people go look at it. Again, the book is Deep in the Wave. It comes out on Tuesday. But, you know, for most people, a rite of passage into adulthood in general, but manhood in particular, is like getting a driver's license, getting a job. I mean, kind of passive sort of things.
It's not really a passage at all, then, is it?
Well, that I guess is part of my question as I'm reading. I mean, I think there are, perhaps we should be tasking ourselves more, you know, hunting or other things to do to create a greater, deeper awakening as we get older.
Like you're reading my mail. I mean, you know, I think, you know, every year for myself personally, I always set a physical challenge of some sort. You know, I've ridden my bicycle across the United States, as you know, and I've paddled, you know, some pretty gnarly open ocean channels and just other areas, because I think a man really needs to learn about himself kind of from the outside. And I think creating a physical challenge, and, you know, hunting is a good example too, because that takes prowess, endurance. People don't have any idea how hard that can be. Something that challenges your prowess, your skill, your acuity, your courage, you know, your ability to withstand pain. You know, that bicycle ride for me, it had nothing to do, riding my bicycle from San Diego to Jacksonville, Florida, that had nothing to do with physical ability. That was all mental, and it also became a, you know, very spiritual experience too. But anybody can press their pedal down one more time if their mind will, you know, tell them to do it. So, yeah, that I think what happens so much with men is you really don't know who you are until you've come to an end of yourself, and you come to that end down there where the spirit and the soul meet, that you get to that place, usually, like we had by coming to that point of where you have to cross the threshold of courage, or you go further than you can in terms of endurance. It may not be physical; it might just be someone working 2 jobs to support their family. It's a rite of passage. We just brought 3 guys out here on Fuel TV's Clean Break series, young men who were in their late 20s and early 30s, and you know, men mature a lot later now.
Yeah.
And these guys were accomplished. One was a successful pharmaceutical salesman. One of them, Luke Rogers, his brother is Aaron Rodgers, you know, the MVP quarterback. And then Chase, this wonderful guy. But all of them were kind of a stage in their life where they really had to assess where they wanted, what the trajectory of their life would be. And so we brought them out here. We had the 6-episode Clean Break series. And we took them through every possible adventure that they could have. And I told them, you cannot go alpha male here. You're not going to make it. You're going to have a point where you get to that breaking point, and then that really will be your breakthrough. That will be your clean break. And I think for men in particular, women have done such a great job of redefining their roles.
Yeah.
I know they're still doing that. And it's kind of like men have kind of lost their way. And, getting the corner office with the real plant, and 2 windows, it doesn't you kind of lose touch with who you really are as a man. You have to get back and you have to put yourself back in positions. It may be someone saying, you know what, I'm going to go down and take those jiu-jitsu classes.
Right.
I'm going to start, going to the gym or something. But there's something to that thing. You know what? That mountain that I've always wanted to hike to the top of, I'm going to take some guys with me. We're going to do that.
Yeah, because I think it has to involve something more than just being in another room. So working out is great, but you're just in another room.
Yeah.
And there's something about being, and I think this, we're talking about how this is also something we've talked about over the years on Coast to Coast, is the delayed adolescence of men and how they're, staying in adolescence for a lot longer. And part of that is there is no, without...
There's no rite of passage.
Well, like it used to be, everybody got drafted to, everybody spent some time doing something that really put them outside of themselves.
Right. Exactly.
Unless you're leaning into what you resist by doing something really hard and really extraordinary, you're not, where are you going to learn? It'd just be another experience you're having in another room,
well, it's like,
not really...
Yeah. When I went to college, there's not very little that I learned that did me any good for my career. I'm a CPA, but what I learned was how far I could go mentally, how far I could push myself. Sometimes just learning things is an endurance thing, but how I exercised that intellectual muscle there. It was more of that than actually what I actually learned. It was building up that capacity, and it's like you said, unless you're leaning in. When I rode my bicycle through Texas, which is a really big place.
Yeah, really.
I got about halfway through, and this tropical storm Allison came up, and if I just left 3 days earlier, it would have pushed me to Florida, but instead I had to pedal my bicycle
against
downhill.
It. Yeah.
I had to push hard to go downhill. But that leaning in, like you said, to that resistance, I think that's really right. That's where you really find what you're capable of, and you're capable of a whole lot more than you think you are.
Well, taking on killer waves, maybe that's in all of our futures. Maybe that's the way we need to create more of these experiences so that we can move our young boys into manhood faster, or take the men that are successful that are doing so and find something that they can really connect it to that makes life feel like it's worth living.
Here's the thing: when you're riding a wave, especially a real special wave. But most times you're riding a wave, you're not thinking about your bills. You're not thinking, just sitting out in the water, you've turned your back on the land. You've turned your back on the earth.
It's true.
You've detached from all the things that society wants you to be. In fact, the word I think in Latin for holy is to be without earth. So you turn a surfer sits in the lineup and he's looking at the horizon. He's looking for that next wave, and he's not thinking about all the pain and suffering and everything else on the, you look at the beach in Waikiki, it changes every day. You look out at the ocean, it's the same. The surfers tend to look out there, and then you wait, and when you ride that wave, it's like someone jumping out of an airplane, the same thing. There are those moments when you're scaling, rappelling down a mountain, when you're only living in that moment. You're not thinking of, you're living in that now moment, and I think we live for those moments. And if you're sitting in an office someplace, or whatever, and you're not experiencing those now moments where you reach that still point, you've lost touch with that. The deepest spiritual part of you is that eternal part, that now part.
Good place to start then. The book comes out Tuesday, Deep in the Wave, A Surfing Guide to the Soul, Bear Wozniak. Thank you so much.
It's available on Amazon now. And Ian, you really increased my cool factor. I'm not kidding.
Well, I'm glad to hear you increase our website's cool factor by the video that we put up at coasttocoastam.com. I hope you take a look at that. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate that. What a